So, without further ado, I'm going to jump into this week's topic, which is basically everyone can lift. So, I think that it's a very common misconception out there that lifting requires a certain level of base athleticism or flexibility or whatever you call it in order to be able to train effectively and without injuring yourself. That's something that's very common is people come to trainers to me saying things like, "Oh, well, I can't deadlift because I'll hurt my back." And the reality is that that's not really quite the way that we get injured. I could talk for a while about exactly how I think we get injured, but the reality is that I'm not uh, a physical therapist. I'm not someone who's a super expert on injury, so I can't really talk to that in a general sense. And I would also like to give the general disclaimer this week, as always, that again, I'm not a physical therapist. I am a trainer. I am a coach. I know a lot of things about how your body adapts and gets stronger. But of course, I'm not going to be the number one expert when it comes to things like injury and recovery. So, of course, I always recommend that you double check anything that I say here with your local physical therapist, especially if you are whatever your situation is. I don't have any knowledge of whatsoever. So, if you're in a position where you're working around injury, I would always recommend going to see a physical therapist over just trusting some guy that you heard on the internet. So that being said, with conversations with a lot of physical therapists, with having been in this industry for a long time, having trained and coached a lot of people who have been working with injury in the past, and basically the main thing is that virtually everyone can lift, but the problem is that many people are sort of forced into boxes where trainers and coaches don't know how to train them effectively, where of course they don't know how to train themselves effectively, and so they just end up making things worse. And so that's not necessarily an indictment against lifting itself, as just the way that a lot of people sort of take the wrong approach to it. Okay, so the sort of general picture of the way that things work is that lifting weights and exercise in general is effectively just an extension of the things that you're doing every day on a normal everyday basis. So, for example, when you do a squat in the gym, you're coming down, you're coming back up, you're using your legs, you're using your glutes, you're using your low back. But at the same time, what you're really doing is essentially just the same thing as what you're doing when you're getting up from a chair, when you're getting up from the toilet, that sort of thing. The only reason that it's different is because you've made it harder somehow. So you're adding weight to the equation, you're adding additional reps, so you're doing it more times within a limited time span, and that's taxing your body in ways that you're not seeing in everyday life when you get up off the toilet. So you're basically just scaling up the things that you're already doing. And one of the big problems that a lot of trainers and coaches who are not, prepared for this, or lifters who are not prepared for this do, is that they scale things way too fast because they don't really know a way to scale things up little by little by little the way that they should be. And so basically, if you can do something without pain, without injury in your everyday life, you should be able to do it in the gym without injury as well. You should be able to progress it in some way, some tiny little way that is not going to hurt you. Um, Now, that said, exercise is not just one workout, obviously. So it's a series of workouts, and in between those workouts, you're stressing your body, you're giving it a chance to recover, it's adapting, it's getting a little bit better, and then you're doing the same thing again. So essentially, you're provoking a stress, you're getting a recovery, you're getting an adaptation, and then you're provoking a newer, greater stress. And in some cases, some people can have disabilities or conditions that actually inhibit that sort of normal cycle of things. So when you have a disability that may impact your ability to sleep, your ability to recover, those sorts of things actually can have legitimate, that may have a legitimate impact on your recovery and may mean that you're not seeing the same kinds of results from workouts that other people are. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that that working out is not, that it's not, that you're not going to get anything out of it. Certainly, even if, say, your recovery is impaired and you can't get, muscle growth because of, whatever things that are going on in your body, you can still find other ways to make improvements. So obviously your body can adapt cardiovascularly. You can have neurological adaptations that improve your strength without the addition of extra muscle mass. Those are all ways that you can see results from exercise without needing to have necessarily the same amount of that sort of recovery process. So it's possible, and again, I'm not an expert on this topic, but it is possible that exercise can help you even if you do have some kind of condition that inhibits your ability to recover and makes those things harder. In a general sense, I recommend lifting and working out, even if you're not going to see huge results from it, because it's sort of like a kick to the system. It's sort of like a little thing that sort of just helps keep your body's functions regulated and functioning in the right way. It's awesome. It's awesome no matter what, no matter who you are. I'll also add that I've worked with plenty of clients who would be considered probably sort of on the low end of things in terms of what they can accomplish. They would do workouts and it would take them a long time to recover from them. And when they did recover, they might not be much better and they'd see very, very, very slow progress over time. But the reality was that even while these clients were sort of disadvantaged in that way, they also, in some cases, were some of my most steady, most dedicated clients. And as a result, they actually got further over a long, long period of time than many of my clients who would say, adapt really well for a couple of months and then they get mad because, something didn't work right and then they crash and burn and boom, they're all out. Quick reminder, as always, like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff will help the YouTube algorithm, help me make sure that people are seeing this video, and especially, if it's helpful to you, hopefully it's helpful to somebody else. So anyway, moving on. Again, as I said before, sort of the big problem is that a lot of clients and coaches and recreational lifters are not actually able to select exercises that are going to be meaningfully useful without damaging their clients. I see a lot of trainers or coaches who are obsessed with putting clients into the barbell lifts really quick. They got to hit the big three. So they're trying to push their clients into the squat, the bench, the deadlift, the overhead press as quickly as possible. And they don't always account for the fact that every single person is different and that some people may not be able to start out in those places. I've seen so many people who hate on the leg press, even though the reality is that if you can't squat, the leg press is a decent solution. It's a decent way to do some kind of exercise for the legs, and it has its own sort of strengths and weaknesses. It is what it is. Another problem is that disability is sort of a very wide topic. There are so many ways to be disabled and there are so many ways to be injured that, when you're coming at it, many people may not be in the position, the same position as everybody else. So since there's so much variety, that often means that trainers and coaches are not prepared to deal with that. They're used to sort of putting everyone in the same box. They're used to sort of, just treating all their clients the same, starting them off at the same point. And if they don't fit into that box, then, they're out the door. That's it. So that's a big problem, is that basically a lot of coaches, don't really take the time to become a good coach by really sort of expanding their knowledge base and expanding sort of their toolkit and expanding, the number of people that they can work well with. So with that being said, I'm going to jump right into basically what I would call my general tips for starting off. Hopefully some of these will work for you. So the first one is start off light and work your way up. In a general sense, if you can do it again with your body weight, if you can do it in your normal everyday life without something hurting, then, that's a good sign. You can start off with your body weight. You can add, just a very small amount of weight, focus on high reps, maybe 3 sets of 10 to 20 instead of just 3 sets of 5 to 10. Adding sets or reps over time instead of adding weight over time is a way of progressing your workouts. And, just focusing on the stuff that feels good. If you, add a bit more weight to an exercise and you find all of a sudden it doesn't feel good, then that's a sign, okay, that's a little bit too much. I'm pushing it a little too hard. I've got to pull back. So reduce the weight. I would say in a general sense that that's sort of the first line of defense, where if something is hurting, if something is not feeling right, the first thing that you want to do is reduce the weight, back off a little bit, and, focus on that. Focus on the endurance, focus on hitting more reps, focus on hitting more volume. because you always want to sort of retreat back to that place where everything feels good. You never want to push it if it's not feeling good. That your dumbbells and your barbells are basically just moved by gravity. So they provide force in a precise downward motion, and that can cause certain problems in terms of sort of the stresses that it places on your body, because you want to train your body in ways that are not just that sort of up and down movement. And so, in certain ways, you can move your body around to sort of accommodate that. So, for example, a bench is done, with your body horizontal instead of vertical, because that allows you to get, a vertical on the bench itself. But at the same time, it causes certain problems, because it just loads us up in ways that our body is not necessarily always prepared to be able to do. So when you use alternate loading strategies like machines, like bands, like cable machines, those allow you to add resistance to the exercise without necessarily stressing your body in the same way. And in particular, band resistance is often very easy to get started off with for beginners. Works really well. It's pretty awesome. Aside from that, you just want to make sure that you're hitting all major movement patterns. So, of course, you want to be doing some kind of pushing movement with your upper body, some kind of pulling movement with your upper body, some kind of squatting or knee extension movement, and some kind of hip hinging movement. Those are going to cover most of your major movement patterns. You can also hit core a little bit. Start off with body weight or something similar. Progress by adding reps, progress by adding sets, and add weight slowly over time. Another strategy that is commonly overlooked is unweighted exercise. So this is something that I've written a lot about in the past in my blog, and I'll share some links in the description below. But basically, the unweighted exercise, research has actually shown that it is actually beneficial. You can actually get an exercise effect out of doing sort of, pretend movements with no weight. So, for example, if you were wanting to, mimic a bench press or a push-up, you could just pretend to do that pushing movement and just focus on tensing those muscles. It's not going to work for everybody, of course, but it works when you're in a position where you're starting off and you can basically do almost nothing else. You can't really add too much weight without causing problems. So, for an example, with a client that I've actually worked with in the past, she started off, she was coming back from essentially a very traumatic car crash. And so as a result, she had a lower back injury. She was really terrified about doing anything that involved moving her lower back at all. And so basically what I started her off doing was just very simple hip hinges. So, essentially just toe touches, really, moving her, bending over, moving her legs down, moving her hands down her legs, and then just coming back up, just sort of getting down into that, moving the muscles a little bit, feeling that stretch. And then over time, we added a little bit of weight. We actually found that she couldn't do it with any amount of weight at first, even with just 3 pounds. So what I had to do was actually set up a little step in front of her so that she had a limited range of motion. She would just go down to the step, touch the step with the weight, and come back up. Over time, we would reduce the step in height, and we got her down to the point where she could go all the way to the floor with just a little bit of weight. And then we would, further increase the weight very slowly from there, again, focusing on high reps. And so that was a really awesome strategy for her, and it really helped her start deadlifting. And before very long, she was able to deadlift with about, 30 or 40 pounds, which doesn't sound like a ton to someone who's been working out for a very long time, but it is a huge amount, because she was so terrified that any amount of weight would just totally destroy her back. And she was so excited that she was able to handle that amount of weight, simply because she had thought, just a couple short months before, that she would never be able to do this again. So, starting off with zero weight whatsoever is another strategy that is often overlooked and that many people will not really consider as a part of their toolkit, but it's really important, especially for people who can't really handle very much weight at all to begin with, or any kind of loading. In terms of cardio, I kind of covered this a lot last week, so I'll share a link to that video in the description as well. For cardio, generally the cycle tends to work best, is sort of the short version. You don't have to go running, you don't have to hop up on the elliptical and all that. So with that said, that is really most of what I have in terms of the Everyone Can Lift segment for this week. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the user submitted questions for the week. So we're going to go back to that point where I'm a little itty bitty video in the corner. As always, remember to like, comment, subscribe. Just help out with the YouTube algorithm, make sure that other people are seeing this video. So quick break, and I'll be right back. This question was left on last week's video. So it says, good to see new content. I'm interested to hear tips on bulking around 4,000 calories a day while keeping a tight grocery budget, fitness and finance. This is a really good topic because I think that a lot of people think that when they bulk, it has to be super clean. And I've written in the past how I don't think that that's as necessary as people think. It is an important thing in terms of your general long-term health, just to make sure that you're not constantly eating nothing but junk food. Of course, it does matter, especially when you're trying to gain weight. But I think that one thing that a lot of people assume is that you're bulking, you have to be eating, chicken and broccoli or whatever. It has to be like the super clean sort of food that you normally associate with health. And the problem with that is that when you are trying to get in extra calories, that's not always going to be the way to do things. If you're going to be eating a ton of protein, if you're going to be eating a ton of fiber, well, yes, that's generally good for you in a general sense. But at the same time, it makes it harder to eat more food because those tend to be the most filling parts of your diet. So, what's the answer here? Well, one thing is basically to focus on protein a little bit less. This is actually something people think, they need more protein when they're bulking. But the reality is that you actually usually need more protein when you're cutting because you need to sort of maximize the muscle protein synthesis in your workouts and try to maintain as much muscle as possible when you're cutting. On the other hand, when you're bulking, you can actually sort of draw back the protein a little bit. You can draw back a little bit on the fiber intake and just focus on getting in your calories in terms of, easy to digest carbs that are going to make it a little bit easier for you to just get in all of your calories in the first place. So, in general, I like to eat a lot of rice. I'm a huge fan of rice. It's super cheap. I used to buy basically a 50-pound bag for like $15 at the local Costco or whatever, and basically just revolve my meals around that. So I would make a few cups of rice a day. I would mix that with some protein, a little bit of some kind of sauce or something, some spices, whatever. And that was sort of one of my big staples and still is around bulking. Another thing is nuts. Nuts tend to be pretty high in calories, and so long as you can sort of keep the stomach them, because in my case, sometimes they give me a little bit of stomach ache. But so long as you can eat a lot of nuts, mixed nuts are another good option because they're pretty high, calorie dense, and they're also super portable, so you can carry a bag with you all day. You can snack on it little bits, here and there when you're at your desk or in your car, and so on. And it makes it really easy to get those calories in no matter where you're going. Aside from that, I just say, it doesn't have to be expensive stuff. Focus on the stuff that's cheap. Focus on your staples. So focus on your carbs, your rice, and even your bread. And don't worry so much about eating necessarily the best quality food. I will admit that in the past, a lot of times I've resorted to going to McDonald's or whatever to just get a couple chicken sandwiches because that'll balance out the calorie needs that I have for the day. And there are a lot of like bodybuilders and powerlifters who have bulked by just eating crap food. Um, so yeah, I guess my biggest takeaway here is just don't be afraid to do what it takes to get the calories in, even if that means eating a bit more carbs, even if that means sometimes sort of dipping on the quality a little bit, because your main goal at that phase is just to hit that calorie target and not to worry as much about how much the how clean it is, or focusing on the more expensive healthier foods. um, yeah, just rice, peanut butter, eggs, milk. I used to get cheap like bulk ground chicken and ground turkey. Potatoes. That was sort of the big staple of mine in many of my bulks. So yeah. The next one is response to the email I sent out about the first week, the first new video, basically saying, hey, sorry, I've not made anything new in a long time. So it says, hey, man, no worries. Sometimes things don't work out and we need a change of media to get going again. I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on ab workouts for people who hate ab workouts. I have the attention span of a gnat. It makes planks unbearably boring. I also know that it's core that's holding back my deadlifts right now. Hang in there. Thank you so much for this. So core is a really interesting topic because I think that core is another one of those things that maybe gets a little bit overemphasized in terms of how much people think it does versus how much it actually does. Planks are an amazing exercise. I love them a lot. They're probably my favorite core exercise. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of stuff from coaches, and in particular, Stu McGill, he's basically a super awesome researcher who studies backs and how they work. And he is kind of critical of planks. He says basically that they're a great exercise, but that once you can do, say like a few sets of 30 seconds in a row without, having any problem with it, then your core is probably strong enough that you don't need to worry about it. And I have, over the years, started to tend to agree. What I've found is that very often when people are not progressing in terms of their strength, it has less to do with the fact that they're not hitting, some arbitrary amount of core work, and a lot more with the fact that, maybe their progression is a little bit off. Maybe there's other stuff off in their life. Maybe, they're not quite following the program as strictly as they want. I've usually found that it seems to be a lot of other things and not so much the core in terms of your strength. In a general sense, I would say that many of my clients, I just give like 1 or 2 ab exercises a week. Planks. I like leg raises. I like hanging and lying leg raises. I like reverse crunches. I don't so much like traditional crunches or sit-ups. They get very boring very quickly. I enjoy doing things that work in a little bit of core in the rest of your workout when you're not expecting it. So stuff like a single arm row is going to involve a lot of core just to, sort of what we call anti-rotation, to prevent your body from sort of getting twisted by the weight. So single arm rows are awesome for that. Palloff presses are kind of basically it's basically a core focused press. Those are great exercises to sort of help build your core that don't involve just, doing planks all the time. I would say that if you can do, say, about 3 minutes of planks, in a row, I would switch it up, add some more difficulty, so you can do stuff like elevate the toes a little bit. The more you elevate it, the harder it's going to be. You can add stuff like little arm movements or, weight shifting, so you can sort of, do reaches, that sort of thing. That's going to add some challenge to it without just being, endless, super long planks, which gets so boring. I used to be a little bit more obsessed with Bruce Lee when I was younger and when I was first starting out as a trainer and as a coach. And I used to just do a ton of core workouts, and I got nothing out of them. They were so boring. I literally had a sit-up bench in my room, and I would like watch an episode of TV, and I would do sit-ups for like 20 minutes straight, and it did nothing for me, and I was way weaker than I am now. So I don't do a ton of core. I do a little bit of planks here and there, and I just try and focus on getting in anti-rotation stuff in the rest of my workout. And I don't worry too much about it, honestly, I'll admit. I think that adding in a lot of core exercises can be useful if you are, say, someone who's training for aesthetics, if you're looking to be a bodybuilder, and you're looking to lean out and have that, really great six-pack abs. But, frankly, I don't think it's as important for strength as people think. I think that once you have sort of a baseline sort of level of strength in your core, there's not too much point to doing a ton more of it. You're going to get a lot more sort of bang for your buck in terms of focusing on assistance exercises for the major muscle groups that you're using in the lift. So, your quads for your squat, your pecs for your bench, your hip hinging muscles, your glutes, your hamstrings, your lower back for your deadlift. So I think that core is, yes, it's great to find other ways to do the same thing that aren't so boring, to find more advanced, more challenging versions of the same thing. I also would caution against caring about it, too much, because, it is what it is. So that is it for this week. Trying to be a little bit shorter, trying to be a little bit more on point in terms of just being a little bit snappier, just, not stumbling over my words so much. So if you liked the video, as always, like, comment, subscribe, leave comments, tell me, what you want to see in future videos, and I will talk to you guys next week. Have a good one.